Thank you very much for inviting me here. Today I was trying to show you some of my work, trying to explain how we process and develop the design through. And before I start talk about my work, I was trying to give you a little bit of a background where I come from. As you know, I came from Sri Lanka. It's an island. It's a very small island next to India. It's a 64,000 square kilometers and 22 million of population. It's a very small island, and but it has a great biodiversity. You can see totally it's almost like a flat ground, but the center it's like a hill country. So because of that, it changed the climate and throughout the spaces, and it is totally different from places to place, and you can travel within a day from one corner to the other corner. So with all that thing, the Sri Lankan architecture is shaped by the Buddhism, and it was introduced 2,500 years ago. So if I'm talking about history or past, so I think the Buddhism we have to talk about, because the Buddhism is the way of living of Sri Lanka. It is like a majority of population to the Buddhist, and because of that, the simplicity, it comes from our roots. So it started from our religion or the way of living. So I think the architecture shapes of that. So this is a very simple quotation I'd really like to show you this. And if I'm trying to show you a little bit of a history, the example that we have seen in centuries, like 5th century. So this is one image from Ritigala, it's a monastery. So most of the example that we can show is the temples, monasteries, and that how it relates with the landscape and how the merge and the balance in between the man-made and the nature. So the balance is more important, and I think we're trying to continue that, the dialogue between the earth, sky and the water that we have learned from the past. And these are some of the monasteries and temples, and actually the progression is very important in the temples, how you taken through the journey, how the pilgrims going into different stages and platforms. So it changed your mindset. So that's the learning process that we start from our past. And then again I can talk about the material. From this time, this is the 5th century, we used the stones that was available, and the building guides with availability of material. So it's more contextual, and the design based on the material. And when it comes to the landscape, it's purely, we're trying to experiential that. So enjoy the water, enjoy the surrounding from the minimal impact to the ground. So the scale of the building almost like human scale. Because of this, again, we continue the same scale throughout our time. And these are the few, the water ponds that we created and how we can blend with the nature. And the left photo, it's what you're showing is the Mihintale. That's where the Buddhism has introduced to Sri Lanka. So we have a temple on top of the cliff, and that is a journey. It's a wide steps, and because of the Raisa is very small, and you won't feel that you're climbing, and its journey is really connected with the surrounding. And as I told you, this is a nice example how we use the timber and understand the material and trying to make the pure and make show the timber quality and keeping the very simple understand technology. Basically in this Candian time, like 13th to 14th century, they have used these pilgrim shapes we call ambalama as a resting places where you have the pilgrim from the places to places of temple to temple. So these are actually made out of timber, but still those pavilions are survived because they have understand how you treat or design to prevent the termite attack. So they lift the building with the boulders and very simple understanding how the water can flow through the building. Building won't disturb the flow of the water, and timber won't touch with the ground. So it's very simple understanding about the material. And from there, I think we had 3 periods of colonization. Initially, we started with the Portuguese, and then Dutch were part of the country was controlling, and then finally the British established their ruling in Sri Lanka. And in 1948, we got our independence. So you can see the different types of architecture introduced throughout that period. So we got the veranda concept from them, and we trying to incorporate the courtyard from that time, and then the colonial. So this period of architectural different style has incorporated to Sri Lankan architecture, but we're trying to find identity, or trying to work with the context to see what we can do with it, our context. And after the 1948 independence, we were struggling to find our own identity. And then I think I have to talk about the Jeffrey Bow if you're talking about present architecture, contemporary architecture. So I have to talk about Jeffrey Bow because he's like a master or the guru in modern architecture. And you can see the different style that he's trying to incorporate in the architecture. But then again, it is more experiential architecture than to see a form. So from the Inadisilla house, that's where the left corner, and then the last one is the Cantilever. So that is like a masterpiece or a modern movement. I can say it's a very much like a contemporary building, but from the vernacular building to a modern building, same architect continues through, but carrying the same principle and trying to give experiential architecture through the different kind of style. And from that pavilion, another 2 pavilions from the same architect, Jeffrey Barber, I'm trying to show you how he has tried to understand the time. And from the initial time, he tried to use the asbestos and with the rafters in a pattern, because that time he was trying to find our own material, because from 1970 to 77, there was a time we have stopped importing material from outside of the country. So we trying to find antiques, materials, cement flooring, everything from local, what is available. But after the open economy start in 1977, we have opened to the aluminium, steel, and all the material coming from the other countries. So from that pavilion openness, we continue to the modern material. He used almost like a very much lead roof and zinc roof with the concrete columns in a cliff, but trying to give the same feel, but using the different material. So, as I mentioned, the way of living of Sri Lanka is based mostly from these Buddhist concepts, and we try to minimize our collecting things and trying to design just what we require. So we require a shelter to prevent from the nature, and we trying to get protect the kids, children, and the women, and we trying to have one room. So one room consists to and safeguard the family, and the veranda is almost like multifunctional space. So we used to live in verandas with more connected with the outside, the nature, and that's where you cook and talk, sleeps, and men used to sleep on the veranda. So that's how we develop our lifestyle, and it continues in this kind of harmony with the nature. And these are the present, the pictures of Colombo. And after the 30 years of civil war, we start developing and trying to find the different identity to it, trying to match with the different other world of the developing countries, and trying to build high rises. So it's still debatable whether we require that high rises or we can still enjoy the green with the small 2-story building with the human scale. So as so my practice started in 2005. So I finished my education in 2004. So it was like 9 years course. So it was a part-time course. So I have to work and study. So it was like totally I had to work within the period of my education. So it was actually totally different way of studying architecture. So we have to work in a chartered architect from the year 1. So I have been working with the 3 architects. So finally 4 years I worked for Anurag Yojana, who has been worked for Jeffrey Baba more than 13 years. So it was not the direct that I have worked with Jeffrey Baba, but I am trying to get indirect influence through Anurag sir. As I mentioned, with this 13 years of small practice, I can say young practice, so we were trying to get opportunities of having around the country with a different climate. So we were trying to work for a different climate zone and different clients and the brief and different program. And the scale of the project varies from a small pavilion to residential projects and temples, and sometimes we are trying to do resorts. So when I started practicing, I was trying to see where can I start my practice. So it was not a big establishment because I finished my education in 2004. So then we want to make a small office, so where it's like not within the Colombo city. So we got a small annex building in a very much like residential area. So we thought, I'm trying to show you how we develop our office from that initial project to the last project that we are now currently practicing. So this is actually a typical Sri Lankan house built in 1960s, and living, dining, and 5 bedroom. So, and there's had a 3 bedroom and a kitchen. That's where we got as our office. We convert that into an office space and the lobby, and where the client can wait, and to create a little bit of extension to it, and we create a small dining area for our staff and small annexure for myself to live with. So that's where the 1 bedroom, we convert it into a lobby. That's where the client can wait. And through that, we entering into another bedroom. So that's we converted into an office room, and then another storeroom, I converted that into my office room, and we work like that. And it was very small practice. So this is actually during a 5 years time, we came up to this stage of having a 6 staff from that office. So we develop with the models, and you can see how we work. And normally we're trying to work with a lot of models, and we develop with the, started with the schematic design, and before we start to finalize the sketch, we try to make a model. So we change the model a few times, and then feel what is correct for myself to present to the client, and then we try to do the presentation. So basically, we try to do most of our work as a typical standard drawing set to get the quotations, but then again, we develop the design through if it's 1 year, 1.5 years or 2 years, that's my design process. So normally we work on site, and we develop through that period of time. I want to have that length to finalize my design, not to make it finalized before the tender drawings. So this is the room that I designed above the kitchen, and we started to plant more trees around the building, and eventually when it started making that upper level, it is almost like grown trees. And within the space, it's without expanding further, and we trying to limit the footprint and create a tower that will match my requirements to sleep, and I have a small studio for myself on top, and trying to capture the cross ventilation from all the windows that I can get in through the space. And that's a new portion of the building. And from that staircase, it's a new portion. From beyond there is the old part of the house. So that's the old kitchen that I converted into my TV lobby, and on top is a bedroom, and then on topmost level is my studio with the library. So in 2015, we just moved into a new house, new office studio. I'm used to work and live in a same space, so I have to design some office where I can live as well. So in 2012, I found this beautiful property more close to the Colombo, and it's about 80 by 40, very small plot of land, but it was almost like a marsh area. And because of we are having 2 monsoon rains, we get a lot of heavy rains throughout the year. So there's no time for rain, so it moves. Sometimes it gets a lot of water flooding kind of situation. So this area is almost like a totally water collecting and reserve for a marsh area. Because this is a sloping towards that area. That's the lowest point, and this water connects into the Parliament water lake. So from that, you can see the condition of the site. It was almost like abandoned, neglected. No one has seen this land as a property that you can build something. So the issues was the designing. So this water can rise up to 2 feet, 3 feet above the ground. So when I'm trying to design, I was not want to do raise the ground that we can create more flooding situation, because we have to leave the ground to be flooded. So then I thought of the simple requirements is having a studio and then the dwelling. So that's why we call studio dwelling. So we have to design to safeguard our studio. Then it's very simple solution. I just understand to make that building lift above the ground. So we lift 8 feet that we can allow the parking happen underneath. So from that point, and we trying to see how we can open out the building to the marsh, how we can enjoy the marsh and the water and the trees, and then at the same time how we can control the other side. So the next issue that we have faced is the sun path, because the site is almost facing the east and south. So the south sun, it hits this facade. So then we have really big issue of controlling the sun light and the heat. So then we trying to think of different solution. Then we thought of, okay, we'll do the total block, and then we're trying to control the heat coming from the west sun, and we can avoid the views from the other side. So, but when I'm trying to think of more and more, then I realize we're trying to have to capture the wind and to make the building cooler. And then we're trying to open out with the punchers, and then the airflow start moving through the space, and then it works with the climatically. So then this is actually the diagram that we were trying to detail. So this is a west facade, and then the heat's blocked from this brick wall, but there are enough holes that is bringing the ventilation through the space, and then 3 feet gap is allowed enough light to come into the interior. And then again we created a small water here that makes it a more cooler environment, and allow this wind blows through the space and create more the wind, pressure wind comes through the space. And these are the ground level plan, and you can see the studio that leads from the staircase coming from the entrance, and you connect with the private area, and then the topmost level is the gallery or the studio that is like a pavilion that we keep it for entertain the guests and friends, and that's the detail section. And you can see how it was, and that was the west facade facing the neighborhood, and you can see this is how it was with the building, and most of the building the column and beam structure, so we have to use a lot of beams here, and it was like quite a cantilever, or we can say without any columns we want to have free space. So we use a lot of beams, so finally we decided to leave the concrete exposed as an interior material. So, and that's a facade, west facade, that is blocked to prevent heat coming in and keeping the holes to get the ventilation. And then again, we have, you can see the cast shadows of the trees from the neighboring side. And then again, that's a view of the marsh that is framed. And we selected a lot of stones from tea estates. These are actually tea estate stone that they have removed, and they've run a lot of concrete retaining walls now. So we collected from there and paved it in the parking area. So this is actually the open and connect with the marsh. And that's a journey. We are taking the guests from the lower level to the upper. And the material we're trying to work with these are stone pavers that we used in colonial roads that we collected again from an antique place. And then we're trying to change it to a polished flooring. That's where you finish your journey from the road level to the office space. And then the volume change from here to a bigger volume. That's where the clients finally stops at our studio lobby. And that's where you open to the marsh area. That's when you totally open out, it's almost like you are living in the marsh and connected almost within the marsh, and it will be a part of it. So that's the view from the office. And you can see we're still trying to work with the models. And another advantage of the material, that is as we use the concrete as structural material, because most of the part is designed with the huge beams and the columns. We only used a few areas that we want to have the concrete as not a structural wall. It's almost like a 4-inch wall. So another thing that we are trying to work with is how we can take our services. So what we have done is the side walls, these are all 4-inch walls, and then we're trying to keep a 4-inch gap, and then we covered with a 4.5 brick wall. So basically the concrete is not exposed to the outside and not get heated from the outside, and then it's like almost like the thermal comfort. We are getting a thermal insulation from the brick, and then the 4-inch gap allowed me to take all my plumbing through the space, and that create my actually more comfort to the concrete. So that we're trying to work how to use the concrete in a tropical environment and a condition like in Sri Lanka without exposed into the hot sun. So that's the facade of the western part. You can see the light filter light comes through the space and created a lot of shadows here around through 2 o'clock, 2 to 3. So we're trying to maintain the same view from the bedroom. That's the topmost level. That's connect both sides of the land. So from the office studio, then I'm going back to my initial project. This is actually a bungalow that I designed for a factory build project. So I commissioned to design a factory building, a 1-hour drive from Colombo. It's in Avisavella. So it's within a rubber estate. So these are the lines that I have noticed when I'm going into the site. And initial idea was actually, again, it's next to the river. So we have to understand how these are all temples that we understand about the condition of the water flooding, and we raise the temples to maintain the water levels. So these are basic understanding about how we design within the context. So as you see, this is a Kannangara river, one of the main rivers in Sri Lanka. So this is the land. So this is the property that I commissioned, and this is the office that I convert. This is actually old building that I convert into office, and this is a factory building that I designed. And today I'm trying to share the the factory engineer's bungalow. He's a German engineer who works for that company, VS Hydro. So then I had a chance of selecting the land. So again, it's a marsh and a water collecting area. So the condition was not so beautiful, but surrounded by the rubber estate. And we're trying to do a few sketches. Actually, the brief was just to design a room for the engineer. So, and again, his dining space and all his requirement with the pantry. And this is the final scheme that we're trying to do with the two rubber walls, and we're trying to place one box on top of that. And we created another level to get the additional room space as an attic for his family. When they come visit Sri Lanka, they have another room that they can use. And that's the elevation. What we're trying to use is, we have experience of water maybe 3-4 feet at that level as a recorded level. So we lift the building and we left the total ground level for the water to flow through the space and keep more secure space on top. And at the same time, we're trying to improve the water. The marsh becomes a lake, and that becomes more focal and cantilevered, and trying to enjoy the water from interior. And the scale we're trying to detail with the windows to minimize when you're going up, you see more lighter. And we use steel as a structure here to make the building more thinner and make it more invisible. And it's merged with the context. And these are the vertical lines trying to merge with the rubber estate trees. That's the open pavilion below the bedroom. And that's the first floor level where you get your bedroom. And above the one room, we created a pool for that foreigner. So this is a space for his bedroom, and that's the attic room. That's a view from the attic, where you can enjoy the surrounding and the lake and the water and the rubber estate. So this is the project, that house that I've done in 2008 and completed in 2009. For houses, actually more complicated than doing a bungalows and studio for myself. So I can, this house actually again 45 minutes away from the Colombo city. And the client is very important when I'm doing houses. So this actually his old house, that's where he lived. And he's actually a graduate, and he came from a rural area where the paddy fields and nice environment, but he lives here in Colombo to do his job, and his wife is a lawyer. And they gradually develop their life with their incomes, and then slowly they're trying to connect these areas. And this is upper level, and that's the lower level road. So eventually this is the upper level area. So finally they contact me and say that they want to improve their house and to renovate the house. Then I thought of, and they said that you have freedom to demolish this and do it new. And then finally we decide to demolish this old house and to make this connect the two levels as a house, and trying to maintain the scale of the house to be 2-story. So it was a big challenge for me, because it's a very much huge length from this point to the other side. So if you see this diagram, it was almost like 10 feet different in each level. This was the old existing house located. So this is the access road. So they eventually taken the lower portion and the upper portion. So in the upper portion, so we were trying to get quarry that was abandoned and used as a garbage disposal area. So we kept taken that portion to that land as well. So the simple theory I was trying to do here is to do a 2-story building in each layer, and trying to connect each ground by having function through the space, and again next level I'm trying to do another 2-story level. So basically you are only designing 2-story building in each stage, but eventually you end up with the 4-story building, but trying to give these all requirements. So the requirements is very simple, as everybody wants to have like bedrooms and living dining and servant quarters, and he wants to add a wife's practice in the chamber. So this is actually the basic concept that I was just trying to incorporate. So you can see the ground floor I left to parking and play area, and the paved area for any function. You can park any number of vehicles. And the next level we cater to have a chamber here with the private staircase to go up and leave the services, everything separate from this fine wall, and left the upper floors to the living and the bedrooms and the pavilion. So these are some of the construction photos that we're trying to work with the carpenter here. That carpenter I'm working with almost during the same period of time. Still he's working for me. And that's how we end up with the ground floor level. This is the arrival porch. You park here and you have a journey to the upper level 10 feet. And that's where the space that is leading to the paddy area. So we use the paddy as a landscape to connect the roots of his village, that landscape, the paddy field as a element, and to connect the past and the present. And this is a passage that is leading to the upper level, where the next stage of the 10 feet above this level, and this screen wall is separate the total service quarters and the kitchen and all their accommodations. And from that point, this leads to the chamber, and it has a separate staircase that is coming from here and their lobby here. So this is actually a journey through the different levels to the topmost level. So you are in the 10 feet above the entrance level, and you go another feet level, another 10 feet, you end up with the living space, and that's the dining at the same level. And that's the topmost level where you meet your garden again and connected with the outside with the pool. And that's the area that we have taken as a part of the land from the neighboring site. It was abandoned land, a quarry. So we convert that quarry into a pool, grotto pool, that is almost like a part of natural pool. And we were trying to work in different levels, but we're trying to connect with the lift core and each level, so we can connect it with this through these steps to this final lane. You end up with the lift where you can access to each level without walking through the steps. So this is actually a different scale of project, completed in 2013, the phase 1. So the client developed now as another phase with an additional, but this is the first phase 1 that I designed. So this is actually a location where the Kandy and the Noor area, that's a very beautiful scenic road, winding road, and you can see that these are the views that you get from that road. So, and again very sensitive and very much like a more regulation that we have to go through when you're doing the design and approval. So as I mentioned, that's by the road, but there are 2 roads on facing the land, and this was actually the section that I was trying to explain. This is there are 2 different roads. This is the main road, and there's another by road. So there's a 60 feet difference from that. So the client is actually a hotelier, that he wants to start some hotel here, want to make a restaurant for 30 people, because his idea is to stop the people who are going from Kandy to Nuwara for a tea, and to sell the tea and to keep them, and he want to get a liquor license. He said we'll have to have rooms as well to get the liquor license. So that's a program. He never said how many rooms he want to have. So when we're trying to get the approval, we have to understand the reservation we have to follow, and then again we only got 2-story building. So with this all requirement 2-story, and again apart from that we had a huge issue. They said the ground floor has to be more transparent. You can't block the ground floor because it was the public, the road and then the viewing deck, viewing area. So you have to leave the ground floor transparent. So you can't have restaurant for 30 people having 5-bedroom minimum to get liquor license within that footprint that we got. So then when we're trying to understand the structure, we have to understand the structure has to come from the natural ground. So the final column is 40 feet high. So then we have to get that thing from the ground. We eventually end up with the 4 levels of bedrooms at the below the road level. So that is actually according to the law and the regulations. We can do anything below. They have not mentioned anything above or below how to do that. They say 2-story and 2-story, meaning that above the ground. So we finally end up with 29 rooms and trying to incorporate the structure as a part of the design. And then we extend the pavilion or a deck to get more views and trying to give maintaining the viewing deck. Earlier it was like an area that people used to stop from here to get photographs. So we captured that idea of, and again giving a beautiful experiential and memorable space by giving a 30 feet cantilever. So that's a simple plan. And again we're trying to do only this portion as a main building and left this portion to keep it again a connection with the valley, and keep this portion for general public. They can stop here and take any number of photographs, and keeping this extended deck for the in-house guests to use this as their photography. And that's the plan of the restaurant. And then the typical bedroom. You can see each bedroom has a bedroom and a toilet facing the valley. So everybody gets, every room gets the best view of the valley without interruption. And that's a elevation that everybody thinks there's only restaurant, but below that is where you get your rooms. And the very interesting part is the client is not willing to get a contractor by using cranes and good contractor to build this. He said he wanted to do a labor contract where you can pay based daily, and it's actually a very risky project. So you can see everything is started with the scaffolding or the GI tubes to do this massive construction, cantilevering 30 feet, but still they manage, the contractor or a boss we call, managed to do this entire building without any cranes and any instruments. And that's the extension towards the valley, and you can see the reservoir from a distance. We turn the building to get the view of the reservoir and focus towards that. And by having this extension of 30 feet or 10 meters, we try to get another additional fine dining space, and then the suite room underneath that. That's the best room of the property. And you can see the rooms below the road level. And that's the view, that's where you got from each room facing the valley and the tea estates. So the topmost level is almost like only for the restaurant. That's where you can, where you have 300 seat capacity restaurant, and from that, still you can enjoy the surrounding, and that you can see the Ramboda waterfall, where that name came to this property as Ramboda. So that's very important waterfall from a distance. And we're trying to incorporate the the color or the material that is almost like a part of the surrounding and not to stand out from the context. So this is another project I thought of to show in a different climate zone. This is in a Jaffna. So totally this is a Colombo, and you can see this is a topmost level of the country, and it's almost like a dry, arid area, and the scale of the building is almost very, very small, and it's full of palm trees and shrub jungles. So this commission to design a factory power plant is for a wind farm, where you create 16 turbines at creating a 16,000 kilowatt generation. So, and by the side of the lagoon, and there's another interesting thing is when I'm commissioned to do this powerhouse, they want me to design their staff quarters as well. So I'm finished up with the design, and this is the powerhouse design. It looks like a wind fan, and then we end up with that kind of a foam that is merged with the landscape and hugging the ground and not to stand out again. So the concept of the staff quarters was very interesting. When I visited the site, there was no scene of the lagoon, but they were saying the lagoon is next to the land. But I was surprised where we can't see the lagoon from the site. So they say if you go above like 15 feet, you can see it. So then we try to understand and we walk through the shrubs, and we finally end up with the lagoon by the side. And the concept immediately understand we have to build something above the ground that can be captured the view. So we lift the building 16 feet to get the maximum view of the lagoon. And you can see that's a concept that I was thinking, this is the human scale with the shrub jungle. And we lift the building total more than 10 feet or another level. So almost like 16 feet from the ground, and to give the bedroom at the upper level. And the lower level we kept it for all the staff, services with the accommodation for the staff and the pantry and the storage. And upper level it's almost like symmetrical thing because of this soil condition we have to use the piling. So it has to be very simple piling because it's not a Colombo. So we use a very simple grid and to make a very much like a symmetrical design to cut down the cost. And we left the center space as a courtyard, then the wind movement comes through the space, and left that thing as a pond where you can collect the rainwater into a center space and overflowing towards the garden again. And that's a section that lift the building towards the maximum to get the view. And finally, we end up with a scheme like that. We try to maintain again the colors to blend with the context, and we used totally open ground at the lower level to make it connected with the surrounding, and that's where you enter to the center space, and the center space open with this courtyard, and that's the oculus, the detail, and the pond in the middle with the circular space. And even if there not rain and there's no water, that pond is almost like a part of the flow. There's no deep edge here, so it's almost like the same flooring going into the same, like a lower level. So you can have without the water even if you want to in a dry season. And the next interesting thing was I was trying to design in a way that journey from these ground level to the upper level in 16 feet, and we want to make it a little interesting. So we're trying to use a little bit of spiral staircase that it won't feel like you're climbing more than 10 feet. So it is a part of and trying to break the simplicity through that the staircase. And from that, you end up with the living space, and then the bedrooms in the corner space, and detailing the corner. Then I understand if I'm trying to open each corner, because the advantage of having these 4 bedrooms in the 4 corners, we can place the windows in a corner that you can take the sliding doors into the walls, and then you can vanish the window, and it's almost like you are again connecting more than having one opening in one wall and again another wall in another side. So by doing this corner window, we managed to get 90 degrees view without disturbance, and again a panoramic view through the space. And these doors slide into this space and created a space that is no window kind of feeling. And with this screen, we try to manage the wind taken to the space and trying to get the light from the upper level with the bounce light from the gap between the roof and the walls. And this is another project that I tried to show. I thought of it may be interesting because this is for the same client that I designed the power factory in Avisavella. So this client had a property in Colombo, and I designed a house nearby, and they got another land, and then I designed, they want to have something like a building, not look like a building or a house, to save and make use of the land and the property. In one day they can make that land into a property or make a building there. So they initially want to make a small pavilion for a caretaker to look after the building. Then a brief frame extended by discussing with me and him, and finally we understand building has to be a boundary wall, not anything else. So by giving a space that we have a 16 feet boundary wall, you don't need to have anybody to look after the property. And then the brief extended again, why can't we have just a shelter to make it in a party or make use of the garden space in any function. So because we were living is smaller than this property. So we developed the program and the requirements with the discussion through the designing. And we finally create a space that is requirement as to make a building to be function as a pantry or a gathering or entertainment area for the guests. So we created the pavilion and then the small box in between. So we created the design like that. We left the total pavilion like that and an enclosed area for here to make it more like a space that you can cook and entertain the guests. And by having a box below the pavilion, we end up with getting a small space that we can use as a reading area, where you can make it as a multifunctional use or another level above the kitchen. So that's the boundary wall with the concrete. Because we have 16 feet high, we need to require a strong wall. So we totally covered the surrounding with that boundary wall to secure the premises. And that's the entrance from the road. We're trying to take the guests through a tunnel, narrow corridor with a dark light, and then we open out to a totally open space that will connect with the garden. So that's the upper level. So that's windows from the kitchen box that we designed with the old timber. That's a pavilion. So from that, I'm trying to show another way of we handle the renovations. So the client again in this project is very important, and he found this land away from the Colombo, and they lived in a Colombo house and they want to make a weekend home, and he's actually a writer. He's having a PhD in Buddhist philosophy, and he just said that want to renovate or do a new project, new building there, because it was like a old house like this and with full of trees. So when I inspect the site, I said, no, we don't want to demolish this site, building, because it's placed in the correct location, because almost like everywhere they have big trees. Even if you demolish this house, we may need to design within this space. So we're trying to incorporate the old walls and then trying to understand his requirement, how to convert that space into his reading and writing area with giving his modern or requirements from an old house to this. So this was the status of the old house, but still they were trying to use two different levels. This is the entry level, but almost lower level is you can have a lower garden there. So by understanding all this is actually the dining hall. It's a very short, like a single story level, and there was space in between the house and the rear boundary. So what we have tried to do is trying to incorporate that rear space into service area and trying to give a new space for the living space and trying to convert the living dining space into multi-story level, that where you can connect the upper level and giving a more pavilion effect onto the rooftop or a first floor level, and where you can come from the parking to the first floor level. So that's a section through the dining area. So initially it was like a single story roof coming down. So we remove the roof and lift the roof to as a one pavilion. So you can see this is the dining early initially. So we remove old windows and try to, and this is the extended living area. So that's my contractor. So we finally end up with clad the walls out of concrete, the rubber, and trying to incorporate with the existing trees and trying to merge with that, to connect with that, and trying to bring them to a wide steps to a lower part where you start your journey through the space and the living, and then that's a new portion, and that's the old part of the house. That's where his writing area. So Varna designed the landscape of this project, and we created a boundary wall that there's not that much of gap in between the room and the wall. So we created the vertical garden, and that's the daughter's room. As one of the requirement is to have a swing there, because she's doing Indian dancing. So we gave her a swing with the balcony that she can enjoy the paddy field beyond that. And that's the new extension above the living, where they can have their guest as their lounge, and where again it's a part of connecting the existing trees. And as I said, the client is very important when I'm designing a house or any project. We are trying to understand their lifestyle and their roots. And this client is a Hindu family. They have a connection with India, and the family's grandfather came from the Chennai to Sri Lanka, and they established in Sri Lanka. So this is actually a project that are trying to incorporate their alleyways, kind of a road network or a street kind of spaces, and trying to connect it with the brick. And we use the brick as a decorative element and to wrap the spaces. So this is actually the location of the site, and little beyond the Colombo. So it's almost like a residential area. There's no views that you can taken from to the project. So you can see number of houses surrounded, and then that's the project, and that's the shape of the land. So we're trying to create a spine and trying to separate again the service course from the other areas. And we continue this pace of volumes and journey through the different functions at the ground level, and left the upper floor as their private spaces where they can have their families requirement 3-bedroom. So that's the wall that we try to detail as a roots and some detail that they are familiar with, and they continue this brick wall into the interior, and that exterior wall connect to the interior space, and that continues through the spaces and creating different volumes. And again it goes out to the exterior, and again it's wrapping this space, and this courtyard is also almost like outside inside, and you can see the rear space from here, and then the courtyard in center space is almost like a part of the living space. but still that the brick continues through the spaces and wrapping the encroaching and trying to give a connection to the inside and outside. And we're trying to create a shrine room underneath this wide staircase, and the staircase starting from here, we created landing a longer, and then you can go again to the upper level. So you have a shrine room underneath, and it has a skylight to get light through that space. And we try to detail the design, the windows that you can control your privacy, and again you can get your ventilation through that, and keeping the small gap in between the window and the roof just to get light when the shutters are closed. Actually, this pond that we designed in a way that you can remove the water and use it like a paver, because we designed a pond is almost like a merge with the flat level. Because when you're trying to design this pond, they got a baby daughter, they had a baby daughter, then they said they can't have a pond. So, but I said, okay, while you can have it after 5 years, we just have this paver going into like a sloping, and you can remove the, you don't need to maintain the water, but when you want to have the water, you just close the stop valve, you create that as a pond that you can enjoy the water. So now we don't have water, and it's almost like the same flooring going and meeting this edge of the dining. And this is actually a project, again I can say the client and his requirement and his budget is more concerned when we are designing. So this is for artists that we just, again, one number from the Colombo. And he actually, and that's facing the highway of the Colombo Gold, and again facing paddy field. So that was a painting that he's doing, this called J.C. Ratnayaka, well-known artist from Sri Lanka, young artist. And I have used his painting for my project. So then he won't use my design, but again he came to me in a way that had a doubt whether I can design his project or whether I can do his project, or he can take my design or can we finish it. So I said, no, what is your limit or budget? He said, very small budget, he don't have money. Then I said, okay, if you are willing to take my challenge and say that we don't need to have doors and windows, we will secure your rooms and leave the ground level open, and trying to save your money by not to have a standard doors and windows and not one kind, and we'll try to salvage any wood that we require. So we're trying to do some challenge material understanding and trying to save money through that. You can see the topography of the land, it's almost sloping towards there. This is a groundbreaking ceremony day. So with that, we're trying to design the spaces that he can enjoy at the ground level, totally open and connected with the courtyard in between, and giving the security to the upper level where he required to have a 3-bedroom. And another important thing he required is to have volume for his studio. So it automatically, naturally with this section, you can see that's a natural slope. We created a dining and the studio in that space where he can work and connected with the family, and trying to manage the upper level to be the same level. So when you go up from here, you are at the same level at the bedrooms, no difference from each bedroom section. So these are some of the construction photos, and that's how we complete the project with the exposed brick to get ventilation and trying to get security and the privacy. And we use the timber as a way that we can collect it from any place, not a one kind, and not ask for a teak or a jackwood. Whatever is available, we collected for a very low price. And he involved with a lot of fabrications, and that's where the garden meets the living. and landscape are designed in a way that we don't need to spend money on the plants, and we collect a lot of plants from the neighborhood and to minimize the cost again. And we try to understand artist living and to try to live, he can live in this kind of environment than anybody, and without complaining or to make a issue with other things like general public. So we try to keep the ground floor totally open. There's no window here, but given a 2-story level wall there, so you prevent and you have more security and the privacy to the inside. But upper level, we created a more secure space and controlled living here. You have a gate there that you can lock your bedrooms. That's a studio. So we created the natural ground, we leave the ground as it is, and we created steps from here. Just they can use that as a gathering space to meet and discuss here when you get a lot of people. So we left that space as more steps, that is most like connecting with the dining and the living, but we're trying to leave the other side as a more natural space that you can connect at the road and the parking area, and still you can come through this space to his working studio. So that's the daughter's bedroom. She used to also start painting her closet. So this is 6 years old, but she's beautiful. I mean, like, we enjoy that painting, and we said, okay, we incorporate that as part of the shutter. So that's the master bedroom connected with the balcony or the veranda there that is almost facing the 20 by 20 pool pond. That's where he almost spending a lot of time when he's not in the studio, enjoying the water. And this is my final project we designed in 2018. So this project, again, a client that I designed a house in Colombo, and they had a big land in Gaul, that's down south, 110 kilometers from the Colombo. And it was actually came through the family and 5-acre land. So quite a big land, but it was abandoned for years due to the flooding. And you can see this dark patch is a river surrounded that land. This is the land, and there's an old house here. So they want to do some, make a design that they can enjoy the garden, they can go back to their village, but again the budget was very low. And the condition of this site, again, because it is water surrounded by the land, is what you call water flooding is the issue, and that's why it was abandoned. So we have noticed a 5 feet level of water, flood level, is eventually throughout the years. So we have noticed that level, and we have to design something within their budget. And he's a jazz drummer, musician, so they don't want to spend a lot of money on this project because this is not their home and a weekend home. They said with the budget they want to have 2 bedrooms, and again to address this water issue. So how to make this building above the ground, so you have to lift the building 5 feet. So again, how to control this flood situation and the budget. We try to think of a material, we can make it fast, and again dismantle it one day, you can again get your return, your investment back. And we use the scaffolding as a material that to lift the building, because scaffolding is only 5 feet, and if we raise the podium, pads with the 6 inches from the ground, just to lift the 5.5 for an additional 6 inch. And then we're trying to design the length and the width of the building according to the standard of the scaffolding distance and the measurements. So we place a 3 scaffolding, that's the width of the room, and we set 2 set of scaffolding 10 feet, and we put a small section to support the roof, just to get a roof above the scaffolding. So that's a design philosophy concept. And we place the 2 bedroom to get the different views of the grassy field, and we left the center space for living and dining. So that's the entrance balcony. You enter to the living space, and then we created a huge balcony that you can enjoy the grass and the vegetation from that, and by having a private rooms and enclosed area, by giving a solid 2 toilets, and then the lightweight structures in these spaces for the bedroom and the balcony. And we use the scaffolding platform as a walkway to the bedrooms. And this is from a higher ground. We try to take the guest through this pathway, and the staircase leading to the 5 feet level of the house or a bungalow. So that allows the water to pass through the building, but you can still enjoy the surrounding. And panels that we use to make the building lighter, not to make it heavy, unstructured. Self-weight, we try to reduce the self-weight. And that's where the outdoor space that have the main dining, that's the indoor living space. We try to find the furniture within the site, and we try to detail whatever is available. And these are some of the container, that package that we use as a bed, and that's my client with the daughter. So I have a small video of the project.